All right, thanks everyone for joining us today on our webinar. My name is Dave Scott and I work here on the marketing team at Cooperative Systems. And today we're joined by Joe Bucceri, who is the Director of Data Center Services here at Cooperative Systems. And today we're going to talk about cloud, co-location, private hosting, and why and how cloud technology can grow your business or kill it. Just a few parking lot items before we get started today. Number one, this webinar is being recorded. So if you have a coworker or a colleague or anyone in your office that you want to see this later on and they just can't join us at this specific moment, this will be recorded and it will be up on our YouTube channel shortly. And you can just check us out on the web at cooperativesystems.com or coopsys.com, and our YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube and type in Cooperative Systems and you'll find where this will be. And we'll also send out the link afterwards. If there are any questions for anyone that does have any, we will be having those questions at the end of the webinar. So feel free to keep them handy and we will tackle them one by one and go from there. So with that said, Joe, take us away and talk to us a little bit about why and how cloud technology can grow businesses or hinder them.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dave. Thanks for the introduction. So at Cooperative Systems, we actually just recently completed an acquisition. And my background, I've been doing IT for now 35 years, and have gone through many transitions and many cycles of the IT landscape over the last 35 years. And you know, things always seem to go in cycles. They go through in areas where there's a migration of data to the user and to local systems. And then as things grow, things tend to go more distributed and get into, you know, the personal computer, the mini computer, the internet, and then consolidations on the internet, and back around and around. And long story short, you know, the cloud is certainly a colloquial term that has been out there for a while. It's certainly not new, but it's an area where our business has been evolving, and we've been assisting our customers to evolve and utilize the cloud. Because, you know, 20 years ago when you were in IT, you know, you were building putting in a server in a closet, and you were doing on-prem installations for everything. And yeah, maybe you had some connections to other things, bulletin boards or email or what have you, but everything resided locally. And now that's really has changed. And even with the pandemic, that's a perfect example of where cloud technology can come into play, where you don't have to have a premise and you can totally operate in the cloud. It's just, what is the cloud for your business, and how does that work? And so that's really the things we're intending to talking about the cloud, what it really is, what are some common misconceptions, and then how can that work with your business. And I'll talk a little bit on the last item about the common the areas of private cloud versus public cloud, and how those areas can get in and help your businesses. So cloud technology clearly has totally transformed things. I mean, we're right now, obviously, this presentation is an example of cloud technology with Zoom. And so allowing people to be geographically dispersed, but still be able to share content and collaborate. So that is clearly an important area, and it's clearly transforming businesses, you know, especially now with the the distributed workforce model. But the cloud itself, you know, is really just a definition of connectivity. It's really just another word for the internet, right? It's how do those pieces come together? You have, you know, where you're sitting whether it's in your home or your office, or, you can't even say, sitting at Starbucks anymore, right? You're not allowed to. But wherever that is, in your car, that's you and your applications and email, and then even all of the different devices with IoT, the Internet of Things. So all of those things come together to form a cloud. And it really just comes down to, how do you put that together for your business? Um, and the other area is, how is that information consumed? How does it need to be consumed? Um, Email is one of the most common things that has been in the cloud for some time, and it's certainly a big starting point. But that is consumed certainly at a much more personal level, with it being, on your phone and on your device. But you still, more and more, the business methodology, especially with, again, coming back to the COVID model, you're working all the time, or at least you need to be connected in some way on a regular basis. And that's really where the cloud and the internet allows that level of connectivity. So, there's other ways to phrase what the cloud is, but I would just say that it's something that really relates back to you and your business. Some common misconceptions, that, oh, if I move to the cloud, I'm going to save money. And while that can be true, it isn't just the be all end all of saving money. It's changing your consumption model. Maybe in the old days, you'd spend a lot of money on a server and infrastructure. So it was capital based, right? Cloud is more consumption based, so therefore it's a cost of goods sold, right? It's a monthly spend, like your cable bill, or your cell phone bill. So in that way, cloud changes how we operate IT and how we spend our IT. It's certainly not one size fits all. That every type of deployment of how you implement cloud technology is totally dependent on the applications, how you use it, the size of your business, and at the end of the day, what are your goals? So all of those things come into play to define how it should be designed and how it should be implemented. It's certainly not a standalone, or I mean, it could be a standalone solution for an individual application, but that's certainly not the best way to use it. The best way to use it is to look at holistically as to how will that benefit your business. And so that's a common misconception. The number 4, the cloud is not secure. That is definitely a misconception, and in some cases, there's two sides to that coin. There's the cloud is not secure, or is can the cloud be secured? Absolutely, it can be. But you also have to be concerned about where the data is, right? And so that's where you get into the difference between public cloud and private cloud. In certain instances, do you want to put your data into a public cloud where you can't guarantee where that data is going to live? And in some cases, based on certain compliance models, you may have some specific data, especially when you start to get into defense and other things, where you have compliance models where your data cannot be hosted anywhere outside of the US. And if you go into a public cloud, you have no control over that. So that gets into the security model, and you just have to know that. You have to understand how you're laying that out. Which then also refers into the next misconception, is that the cloud is too complex. It absolutely can be complex based on what we were just discussing, based on the type of data that you have and your compliance models. And if you just go at face value that oh, if I put my data up into Office 365, I know absolutely positively my data is going to be stored in the US. Well, that's not a guarantee. So there are ways to control that. And it doesn't have to be overly complex, but you just have to have the goal and you have to understand what your needs are and then you can get around those issues. So the one of the real benefits of the cloud is that it's ever changing, right? It's almost like you're plugging into an unlimited set of infrastructure that is just constantly growing and changing. And so that's one area where, again, that can be a major benefit to a business that and again, I'll come back to the case in point of, well, this past March, when all of a sudden every business had to transform how they do business. I know at that time we were part of a big Fortune 100 company, and we were given the edict everybody now had to work remotely, and we absolutely were utilizing cloud technology to do that, at the flick of a switch to a certain extent. Now, a lot of things were things that we had in place, but it's still that capability of the fact that the cloud was able to absorb that level of change, and we were still able to function the day after we made that change over a weekend, was a perfect example of why the cloud is such a strong a strong thing to be relied upon. Now, there's two sides to that, and everybody working from home, does that make them happier? In some ways, yes. In some ways, no. It's just a new paradigm. But there's certainly the flexibility is I think one of the most important things about where cloud provides value today, in that every business is constantly being forced with different changes and different ways to be able to do business and to be able to grow, and having that structure available, flexibility allows you to potentially provide options to your employees that absolutely can make them happier. So getting into some of the other sides of the cloud. So in this particular slide, we're talking about, hey, I can access my CRM tools and my billing systems in a cloud environment, and that's certainly the case. It certainly depends upon what applications you run. Some applications are native right out of the box, cloud oriented, salesforce.com as an example. But a lot of people use a combination of tools. And so that's where you start to get into the world of private cloud and trying to design what is the right solution for you. You may be I'll just use as an example, when we talk about billing software, maybe you're an accounting firm, and as an accounting firm, you have a lot of different customers, and all of those customers maybe are using QuickBooks, but they're not necessarily using QuickBooks Online. Maybe they don't want their QuickBooks data put into QuickBooks' data centers. Maybe they want to have more control of it. But from the perspective of even from that, going back to an accounting model, if you're a CPA firm and you are doing work with lots of different customers, you don't necessarily want to subscribe to QuickBooks Online for all of your customers. So that's where you want to have that locally. That's where we get into, in a private cloud, we're able to build an environment that allows you to be able to take advantage of cloud technology, and still be able to get at that billing software for all of your users, for all of your data, and know where it is and know how it's secured. Clearly, another element of cloud is backups, and that's something that in some ways can be a little misconception, that people think that, oh, if I use Office 365, my data is always guaranteed to be backed up. Well, while absolutely Office 365 has tons of resilience in its environment, because they're dealing with the systems at a very large scale, unlike a smaller business, for them to be able to restore, if you had a problem, let's say you had an issue with, one of the big problems facing the business world today is ransomware and malware. And malware, one of the things that can happen with malware is somebody can put a virus on your machine that if you clicked on the wrong thing in an email and that encrypted your data, well, that could also potentially encrypt your email. And even if that email was hosted with Office 365. And in that environment, then how do you restore your individual mailbox? That can actually be very difficult. And it's not something that's just a simple flip of the switch and they restore your mailbox. So sometimes you want to sign up with a service that can separately back up that Office 365 data, but also cloud-centered. In that particular example, you're actually using two different clouds to make sure that you're protecting your data. And certainly the cloud in and of itself, because of its scale and flexibility, can provide you disaster recovery. But again, it also depends upon how it's designed and how you're utilizing it. If you're exclusively accessing your cloud from your office, well, obviously that doesn't take advantage of cloud technology, but that puts you into a scenario where your office is down, you can't get to that gateway. Clearly, well, why would you do that? Well, but it does get into how you design the solution and making sure that you're building it in a manner that can take advantage of redundancy. Certainly, private cloud is an environment where we, as the designer of private cloud infrastructure, we have to think about how we implement disaster recovery and how we build that in and make that seamless for our customers. And certainly, data loss and disaster recovery are certainly in the scenario where I was just discussing, with making sure that even you're replicating and getting your data into other clouds so that you have resiliency. And then, but that then also ties into how do you handle operations? One of the methodologies, as an example, I keep coming back to Office 365 because it's one of the most pervasive cloud environments out there. It's certainly not the only one, but even in that environment, they can have an outage. And so how do you utilize other technology? And so sometimes it's a way of designing multiple layers of cloud. So in our example, we typically work with multiple providers. So we happen to use Proofpoint as an example for our email filtering and archiving and encryption. And the benefit of that is, if Office 365 had a problem, you could log into the Proofpoint portal and you could get your email, any new email messages. So that is a way to provide you resiliency, but it really just gets into how do you implement and design the solution that's going to make sure that your business can operate when there are unplanned events that happen. So let's talk a little bit about just that happier employee productivity, and what are some of the common methods that the cloud is used. Certainly file sharing, document control. A good example of that is SharePoint and Teams. With Office 365, SharePoint is a way for you to put up files and folders into the cloud and allow multiple people to access them. So it provides that document control so that you know multiple people are now editing the file and can provide content to that. But it also allows people to be able to access it in a uniform manner. So that's where that file sharing comes into play. That's certainly not the only option out there. There are certainly other tools. We've used Citrix ShareFile is another common tool that's out there that allows for sharing of files and folders and document control. But at the same time, whatever you do, you want to put it in a manner that you know is going to be secure. You can be accessed in a way that allows you to easily access that data and allow for taking the complexity out of your IT system and out of the cloud. And then at the same time, by it doing that, you're able to also again get into that model where you're accessing it from anywhere, and in some cases any device. You can have the Teams client on your on your iPhone, or in my case, I happen to use a Samsung, so it's a Droid. But I can load that Teams client, and then I could access a document on my phone at the same time that somebody else is accessing it on their on their home computer and on a Windows desktop. So it gets into accessibility and availability. And then again, you're just adding additional agility and mobility to be able to work from anywhere in terms of increasing efficiency and again, the cloud, because of the way it's built, just allows for more flexibility. You need to get more people into it. Well, you just add more accounts. It's got a lot of capability on the back end. And as long as you have internet access, you can get at it. And there's obviously lots of different ways to get internet access, whether it's accessing it from your phone or accessing it from from a laptop or a desktop. And again, coming back to the disaster recovery, built-in backups. Some of those things are by default, but not all. So you have to be careful about how you decide to utilize the tools. Some of the tools have built-in backup capability. Certainly, OneDrive. OneDrive is an example of sort of an immediate backup capability. With OneDrive, you can have files that are replicated to your local workstation, and then they're automatically replicated to the cloud, so that you don't have to be in front of your computer. You can then log into your OneDrive console and get access to those files. But it does give you that resiliency that if there was a problem both of my local PC, I could access the files in the cloud. And even if there was a problem where I can't get access to the cloud for some reason, because OneDrive is replicated locally, I still have access to my data. So you have to be careful about how that's implemented and designed, but at the same time, there's a lot of functionality built into that gives you disaster recovery capability. I'll use an example of getting into our private cloud as an example, let me come back to that scenario that I mentioned where I was talking about an accounting firm. So we happen to we have actually a number of customers that are in that field. They're CPAs, and they had the classic model previously of on-prem implementation with on-prem servers, and their accounting systems were all local. And they were looking for a lot of the things that we're talking about right now, where accessibility, both for being on the customer's site, working and trying to, audit their books, but at the same time, accounting schedules, when it's tax time, they're working, 20 hours a day in some cases, and they don't always want to be in the office. They want to be able to sit at home. And so that's where our private cloud infrastructure gave them that functionality. We allow them to take away the cost capital side of the business, so that they're able to then procure from us based on a consumption model of what they need in terms of resources. They're able to access it securely over the internet, to a way where they effectively have a desktop that they're getting from any location. And in that desktop, they're then accessing their known applications, whether it be their multi-tenant accounting platform, or whether it be, opening up a copy of QuickBooks for one of their individual customers. That functionality for them works the same, whether they're sitting at home or whether they're sitting in the office or whether they're sitting at the customer's location, because of the way we've deployed that solution for them. And they're able to just basically pay for the usage and the management of that infrastructure, based on what their needs are. So it's no longer a capital play for them, it's an operational play. And then that operational play can scale with them. As they add more users, then we just, their consumption increases. So yes, their spend goes up, but then at the same time, if they have to staff up, well, then we can support that staff up. And then let's say they shrink back down, well, then we can support that as well. At the same time, by being in our private cloud, we adhere to standards. So our private cloud infrastructure is audited on a regular basis for SOC 2, for HIPAA, and for PCI, so that they know that their environment is secure. They know where it's stored. They know that it's not overseas in some far-flung data center that they don't have control over. But yet at the same time, they can be confident that their system is meets compliance standards, but at the same time, we've built an environment that is enterprise class and has redundancy and disaster recovery built in. So that's an example of private cloud for that particular instance. So at the end of the day, we are Cooperative Systems is a managed services provider, and we act as the consultant that allows you to have a combination of tools, right? We utilize and consult and help you determine the cloud solutions, the public cloud solutions like Office 365, and how that can then integrate and work with a private cloud that is built and customized for your needs. So that's really where those things come together.
This is awesome, Joe. Thanks for all that info. We've got a bunch of questions, so I'm just going to start at the top, if that's
Sure.
cool with you. One of the first questions is from John. John wants to know if we were to move and migrate data from existing ERP data, he says ERP and business CRM, business ERP data from on-prem to the cloud, what's the time frame to do that?
Well, it really depends. It depends upon the solution. In some instances, it doesn't have to be a super long time frame. We have had, in some instances, you have your ERP system. It really comes down to us discussing with you and knowing who your ERP vendor is. Maybe that ERP vendor has a cloud offering. We have a number of customers who have ERP solutions, and some of those ERP vendors have been moving to cloud-based solutions. But we've also had customers who've been dealing with legacy ERP systems, and they haven't been able to upgrade. And so that's where, in that particular case, we can take that ERP system that resides at your office, and we're able to host it and put it into our private cloud, and allow you to deploy that same application on a server that's in our office, that's in our data center.
Okay, that makes sense. The other question is from Kyle. Kyle asks, if we were to move to private hosting versus co-location, what's the difference, and what does that environment difference mean to us, to our business? And I don't know what kind of business he has. He didn't say, but maybe Kyle, if you want to leave a comment and tell us what sort of industry you're in. But that's his question is, if we were to move to private hosting versus colo, what's the benefit and how does that work?
Absolutely. So co-location is a service that we do offer to our customers. It's really it's a fundamental building block type of service, where we have a data center. Obviously, there's a lot of different data centers that can offer that type of a solution, but we will provide you a rack. We provide you the power, and then you bring your own equipment. We can provide connectivity, whether it be private circuits, whether it be cross connects to another carrier, or whether it's our blended internet, where we have we have what we call a blended internet, where we have multiple ISPs and multiple carriers, and we have our own IP stack, and we hand that off to you, and you can consume that internet bandwidth based on what your rack or requirements are. So that's the classic co-location. It's been around for quite a while. Private cloud is really an area where instead of you bringing your equipment, maybe we pick up your servers, right? So maybe you have in your environment, you've got some legacy hardware, or you've got an environment that, is in need of updating. Maybe you're dealing with Windows 2008 server and you need to get off of that and you're looking at a big project. Well, that's an environment where we can spin up new Windows VMs under our private cloud offering, and we can then migrate your applications to those VMs and do a virtual private network to your office, or provide SSL VPN type connectivity into those applications. So private cloud is really, you're dealing with VMs that maybe we co-manage together, and we provide you access to those VMs, versus co-location is more dealing with just traditional hardware.
Oh, that makes sense. We have a question from Scott. Scott asks, if we are a manufacturing firm and we have our accounting data and our CRM data, I think he misspelled CRM, and we want to upgrade, and we want to move to the cloud, and we want to upgrade from Windows 7 to the current O365 environment, what does that look like? And he says no judgment, because they have Windows 7 devices.
Oh, sure. No, listen, you're not alone. I mean, there's still a lot of people that it can be very painful to do technological upgrades like that when you're dealing with an OS. It's not like you wanted Windows 7 to become antiquated, you know. And in some instances, there are applications out there that don't support it. But for related to a manufacturing firm, typically migration to the cloud comes in multiple phases. You can still have local based applications and you take it and migrate one thing at a time. So in other words, you can start the move to Office 365 and still have a local ERP system or a local CRM system. Get the email up there, get your, utilizing Teams or utilizing SharePoint, and start sharing documents and data, and then look at your ERP system and figure out, can that move? Do they have a cloud version of that, or do you need to look at a private cloud offering to get yourself out of being tied to your local physical infrastructure?
Cool, that makes sense. We've got a question from Robert. Robert asks cost question, which I know is always tricky. So, answer it certainly as best you can, Joe.
Absolutely.
He says cost differences to moving from on-prem to the cloud, maintenance costs, and is there a cost difference between cloud providers, and what cloud providers does Cooperative Systems use and recommend? So a three-part question.
Sure.
What do we use and recommend? I'm assuming Robert, he probably means AWS versus Microsoft or whatnot.
Correct.
And then he also, the first two parts of his question are around cost differences if they move from on-prem to the cloud and so on.
So as I was mentioning, obviously some of the cost differences between on-prem and the cloud, as I was saying, that's where your IT spend changes, right? It changes from a capital project-based environment to more of a consumption model. So it turns it to, an operational cost. Now, obviously with on-prem, you've got operational costs. You've got an internet connection, and maybe, if you've got multiple offices, maybe you have a wide area network and things like that. And you're paying for AV, and you're paying for, maybe you're already doing backups to the cloud or something like that.
Right.
But migrating into the cloud basically takes away all of it can take away a lot of those on-prem costs, right? Now you no longer have to pay for maintenance. You no longer have to pay for, you still need an internet connection and you still need certain aspects of it, but it can move the operational expense to the cost of moving to the cloud. Now you have to be careful because there are some versions of the cloud. So I'll segue, and I apologize if I'm sort of bouncing around with my answer, but AWS is a great provider. We are mostly a Microsoft shop, so we're centered around Microsoft technologies. So we are a Microsoft CSP partner, and a SPLOP partner from that perspective. So, but at the same time, when you put your stuff up in the cloud, you have to be careful about, oftentimes cloud models, you can get in there, but pulling your data out comes at a price, because they charge for consumption of the bandwidth getting pulled out. So you have to be careful about that, and you have to analyze that when you do that.
So they'll charge you extra for pulling certain amounts of data from one place to another.
Correct. They don't charge you for the upload, but they'll charge you for the download.
Okay.
In some instances.
What does that charge or that cost look like?
Depending upon the volume of data, it could be thousands a month.
Okay.
If you're dealing with gigabytes, or petabytes of data that's getting sucked out. So the example there is disaster recovery.
Right.
You push your data up, and in that scenario, it's great. It's low cost, and you have that maybe fixed expense. But then in a disaster recovery model, you're going to pay an uptick because now you got to suck all that data out.
Right. Nope, that makes sense. Makes perfect sense. Let me see a couple other questions and we'll wrap this up. David asks good name, by the way. He asked the question around hardware versus software in thin clients. So what sort of hardware expectations should we have if we decide to, and God, these questions are really good. What sort of hardware expectations should we have moving to the cloud, and what sort of virtual expectations should we have for software moving to the cloud?
So excellent questions. Certainly there's an aspect of, in moving to the cloud and Office 365, more and more of the application vendors, Microsoft as an example, is trying to move to that consumption model, right? Where you pay, a monthly fee for your applications. You can still do a mix, right? A classic environment for small businesses where, okay, I bought, Office 2010 and I installed it on my computer and I paid whatever, $200, and I don't need to touch that again because I don't always need the latest versions. And that's absolutely true. Where we get into is we can get into a mix, right? Because certain times you do want the latest version. You do need to that update. And that's certainly where Office 365 can get you to, where you do that model with your Office 365 and you deploy that in your cloud and you utilize those Office 365 licenses. We, as a Microsoft SPLA provider, service provider licensing model, is where that comes from. So when we spin up servers for our customers, the cost of the Windows server is included in our monthly VM cost.
Okay.
So they don't have to pay that licensing model. So that's one of the things that's a benefit, and we take that off of, instead of you going out and having to spend especially now with the core-based licensing, you buy a server that's got 40 cores. Well, you got to buy a license of Windows for 40 cores. And when you spin up a VM in our environment, we take that pricing model off your calculations. But I think to get back to the question, licensing really it varies, and it gets into, what are you deploying? There are certain times when it's cost effective to utilize the monthly subscription licensing for flexibility purposes. Okay. But that can cause you to pay a higher number, right? Over a 36-month term, you may spend a lot more on that monthly spend. So that's where we'll end up doing things like, for example, we have customers who have a big SQL Server environment. And in their case, we could give them a SQL license that's included with that monthly spend on their VMs, but it's actually cheaper for them we'll sell them the open business license. So they'll spend a lot of money up front, but now that license is good for them because that SQL 2019, they know that it'll be good for them for the next 3 years. They don't want to do, because it's a core production application, they're not going to be doing SQL upgrades on it for at least 3 years. So therefore they can save a little bit of money. So it's, my point is, it's a mixed bag. It depends upon how we engineer the solution.
Okay, that makes sense.
I did hear a thin client, so I didn't want to get away from that as well. We do have customers that have thin clients. We are a big Citrix shop. And so we do have customers that deploy with thin clients. You have to be careful. It depends upon the application. Lots of browser-based applications sometimes don't perform as well, but it depends.
Got it. That makes sense. And the last question comes from John, and he asked the question of, how often should we revisit our cloud strategy?
Oh, good question.
Yeah, that is a good one. This is the last one, by the way.
Yeah. So to me, it's part of, at bare minimum on an annual basis. It's part of our recommendation is to do, we do quarterly business reviews, which obviously are every 3 months, with our customers. And you're usually looking at your overall technology, but you don't have the time to get in and do a true strategic review. It's really, you're creating an annual plan, and then the annual plan is being reviewed on a quarterly basis. At bare minimum, a business should have a 3-year plan, and then you're reviewing that on an annual basis. But annually is really how often you should be at least reviewing things.
Okay, that makes sense. Well, Joe, that was it. Those are a barrage of questions. Holy cow, I was impressed. And you handled them perfectly. So any other items you wanted to wrap up with, or any final words you wanted to say, Joe?
No, I think yeah, those were a lot of great questions, and this was a pretty broad topic. We're certainly happy to work with each of you as a customer, and if you want, we can have a discussion about your needs and capabilities and design a solution, or at least provide consulting.
Yeah. Perfect. That makes sense. And Joe, could you go back just a slide or two to show us that URL again, where people can learn more about our cloud solutions and get in touch with us? I think
absolutely
it was
right there.
So if everyone would just check out us online at coopsys.com/cloud-solutions, and you'll be able to learn a little bit more about a lot of the benefits that Joe was talking about today, and get in touch with us if a cloud assessment based on your solution, your situation is important to you. So thanks everyone again for joining us. Joe, thanks for presenting today. And this was wonderful spend of my time, and I'm sure it was for everyone else as well.
Yes, thank you for attending.
Thanks everyone. We'll talk to you soon.
All right.